mighty. Not because you want to, but you have to. Be bold and no time to be bashful. Grab life by the horns like a natural. Be sharp, be quick, and be agile. Never ever let a competitor catch you. Stay ahead of whatever is trying to pass you. Though it's not a race, sometimes that's how you gotta operate.
Hello everyone, welcome back to S-Factor Labs. This is the morning boot up. I'm glad I've been able to do this consistently, actually, making it a weekly thing, like I had wanted to. This whole YouTube thing definitely fits my life scheduling a bit more than trying to stream on Twitch once or twice every week. Though over there I am still trying to do so once at least every 2 weeks. And it's been going pretty well so far. So this morning, while I drink my coffee, I just wanted to talk to you about a quick topic, just get my thoughts out there. That's what I do on this particular segment. And this week it was kind of inspired by a video I had watched, well, a few videos really, and overall just a lot of experience with games over my lifetime. And it's about just the general idea of what makes a game fun. Because I started playing games when I was about, I think I was 3 or 4. I think I was 4. And I started playing it with my father. It was Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis. When I was 3, I had watched him play. But then when I turned 4, I started playing with him as player 2, controlling Tails. The character who really was immortal. Even if you took a hit and died or fell or whatever, well, if you took a hit, you never really would disappear. And then if you fell off the stage, then you would just come back. Just fly back in onto the screen like Tails does. So I got to contribute, but was never a detriment. And honestly, the old games of the 90s like that, having those kind of features was great. It was just, I was able to enjoy playing with my father. A lot of good memories. We mastered that game so much through repetitive playing, because back then games didn't have save files. So we would start from level 1 every time we turned on the game. But we played it so much together that it never got old, because also Sonic was one of those games where you would it would get better the better you got at it. The better you get at the game, the better paths you find and such, and the better experience you have. So it's a game that gets better along with your player skill, which rewards that repetitive playing it over and over from the beginning, because every run can feel different as you get better. And we got to the point where by the time I was 5 years old and he would let me play as Sonic and he would play as player 2 Tails, we got to the point where we would have all 7 Chaos Emeralds by the middle of Zone 2 Act 1. So I guess by traditional terms, the 3rd level. And I would just go super and he would just let me go. He would just let me fly. Actually, no, we got to that point before I even turned 5. When I was still playing as Tails, we would get all 7 emeralds, he would get 50 rings, transform, and then just hand me the controller and let me go buck wild. So good times in general. And ever since then, games always had that social element to me, at least for the majority of my lifetime. Bonding with family and friends. Even my mother played games with me. She had her favorites too, including a tough-as-nails platformer of the old 7-Up mascot called Cool Spot. As well as like the tough Disney platformers of the Sega Genesis era as well, like the Aladdin and Lion King games, and Jungle Book. They all were good games, they were just so hard. And I learned later on, in like a YouTube video or like a development kind of a developer featurette, particularly regarding the Lion King game on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, was that back then the publishing companies told them to make the game difficult on purpose, because back then places like Blockbuster and Family Video, rental stores, were much more prolific. This is way before Netflix or Redbox, and so, or Gamefly or what have you. So with games, they purposely made them hard so that you could not, or it was very difficult to complete it, to clear the game in one rental. You had to rent it multiple times and get better at the game to the point where you could clear it in one week. So that's why those games are so hard. But that actually helps them to age better because, what was it, like 2 years ago, I played through the Aladdin and Lion King games with my folks when they were re-released on modern consoles as the Disney Classics Collection or whatever it was called. So like myself, my brother, and my mother, we all sat down and played through it like old times, and it was great. And those games are still fun even today. So the difficulty actually helps them to age well. But that ties into the topic as well, of what makes a game fun. Because for me growing up, what made them fun, a large part of it, was that social aspect, sitting down and playing with others on the couch, the couch multiplayer, or passing the controller every time you lose a life, stuff like that. Or even later on, couch competitive play, versus in games like Smash Brothers and other fighting games like Tekken and Virtua Fighter. And so it's like that social element of playing with people you're already close to, or bonding with people over them. That always was an aspect that made games fun for me. Others, they do find competition fun, and I did for a little bit. I used to compete in Smash Brothers for Wii U and Tekken 7, but those stopped being as fun after a while. Honestly, as I got older, because during I think it was mostly my teenage years, and late teen years particularly, teen and late teen, where the competitive drive was there to play games competitively among my friend group, and then later at actual proper tournaments, local tournaments. But as I've gotten older beyond that, I've stopped caring as much about competitive games. If anything, most competitive games are designed in ways that actually are a bit more frustrating than fun for me. And that was part of a discussion on that was part of what inspired this video, or this topic, I should say, because a lot of competitive games nowadays have very lacking design sensibilities, in my opinion. Particularly ones that in the genres that I'm experienced with, which would be like fighting games. They are very, very lacking in like in-game unlockables, which didn't used to be the case. Back in the day, you could unlock all sorts of stuff from characters to like say in Soul Calibur, alternate weapons, which every character had like a ton of them, like 5 to 10. I played the GameCube version, which had Link from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time in it, which was the only reason I even got the game in the first place. And he had all sorts of the different weapons that you obtain in Ocarina of Time, which was great nods and stuff. Just really cool stuff that, didn't really impact competitive play, but gave you a reason to play beyond just playing versus mode. Also single player modes like the Weapon Master mode, where it's like a dungeon crawler basically, with encounters being the actual proper versus fighting game play. And then like Soul Calibur 3 had like a strategy RPG system where you're moving units around, the grid-based field, and then when you get into engagements, then it becomes the fighting game mode. So it's like Fire Emblem, but a fighting game. And it's just like stuff like that used to make fighting games so fun in so many ways. And of course, we know Smash Brothers surpassed all traditional fighting games because of the granularity or the modularity of how you can play how you want. So all the items on, how frequent the items appear, which items can appear, game modes other than stock. You had like time mode, where it's whoever gets the most KOs wins. You had stock mode, which basically every character has a certain amount of lives and you can set how many lives. And then you had like coin battles, or various like special modes, like everyone's giant, everyone's metal. Just there's all sorts of crazy cool stuff you could do in it, as well as all the other alternative modes like board the platforms, or reach the finish line in a set amount of time, and classic mode and adventure mode. Just so many different ways to play the game other than just versus, just competition, just beat other players. A lot of them were kind of like still semi-competitive but casual, fun party modes. But then others were like operative modes like Smash Bros. Brawl's Subspace Emissary Story Mode, which basically is like a Metroidvania platformer with the Smash Bros. Gameplay. It was actually really fun. But yeah, fighting games just used to be more fun. And not even counting the game mechanics, how in modern days, since the average attention span has been shrinking, with some studies suggesting that the average human attention span in our modern convenience age of instant gratification, on-demand streaming services, and social media, and short-form video social media like TikTok, that now some studies suggest that the average human attention span has shrunk to almost below that of a goldfish. It's hilarious to think about, but it also doesn't sound too far-fetched, all things considered. But with that in mind, like, obviously game developers have had to adjust how they design their games in order to, succeed in the current landscape. And fighting games, I think, have struggled the most with that because they lost a lot of the content that used to be in them. A lot of the alternative game modes, they stopped putting those into it because of the lacking of budget, because fighting games just are not very profitable compared to almost every other genre out there still. And then on top of that, like with the shortening of attention spans, the play styles that are allowed to be effective have been narrowed. So like developers purposely design their games to penalize you for playing too passively or defensively, aka turtling up. They punish you for blocking attacks, when originally blocking was the counter to striking, and throws were the counter to blocking. It was a triangle that balanced out the gameplay and gave players the tools to beat turtling players with throws. But then they weaken throws because people complained about them too much. Then they strengthen strikes, and some games make them very advantageous when attacking someone who's blocking. And then the balance of the game fundamentals, the foundations, just go out of whack, and you just can't escape it. It's crazy. So now people like me who play like a defensive outboxer, Muhammad Ali style, or Floyd Mayweather, or more generically like a fencer, with that spacing, focusing on spacing and defense, and then attacking when you see an opening, I'm just not allowed to play to my strengths in modern fighting games much anymore, which is another thing that has reduced my fun in the genre. And while other genres also have adapted to the modern attention spans, like let's look at, games like Fortnite, which is wildly popular with the kids. In those games, if it's not full with players, they put in bots, but the random elements of like the loot, the gear and weapons you find, gives you that like dopamine hit. You go into the nearest building after you drop, and bam, there's some gear. So you automatically get some good feels in the brain. And then when you open a chest, you find a treasure chest with the sparkly sound or whatever, then you get some good loot, and it's like, yes, this is awesome. Not to mention unlocking cosmetics and dance emotes and stuff. There's always something happening, especially since you drop in with, 50 players? Some games 100, I'm not sure. But you drop in with a lot of players, so the likelihood of there being some action early on is very high. And then, after you lose, all you have to do is press one button, and you're right back into matchmaking to find another match. Then once I find another match, you're right in. So it's quick in, quick out, or if it's quick out, then it's quick back in, more accurately. So, the design of a lot of modern games has adapted to the modern attention span, but not as much on a core gameplay level where you punish people for playing how they want. Like, obviously some games are going to be, have things to disincentivize being too passive and cowardly, and I get it. Like, for example, say a game where someone's hiding somewhere, camping, then if they don't move long enough, the melee combat battle royale in Naraka Blade Point has a good example of this. You can, if you want, you can hide in a bush or something for however long you want, but there's often these little bonus objectives, optional bonus objectives that spawn, and if someone takes them, a lot of times it's like, defeat the marked player to get a bonus. for this match, you know, or that goes towards a long-term progression unlock. And it'll make that player's area, the area they currently occupy, visible on your map and your mini-map. So, like, I think they usually spawn that so that it will kind of out the campy hiding kind of players. And that's fine. That balances it out. It makes it so that there's a risk to playing that way. But they don't prevent you from playing that way. That's the thing. They give you the freedom to play as you want. Fighting games nowadays don't give you that freedom anymore. If you don't want to play offensively, you just don't get to have a good time. And for me, that's just not fun. So I honestly haven't played many fighting games for the last 1.5 to 2 years. I've been focusing more on other genres and having a much better time, like Monster Hunter Rise. And that's an interesting example in the whole topic of fun, because historically, Monster Hunter has been a very unapproachable game series, very difficult to get into. Mostly because its game design, its traditional game design from like the PlayStation 2 through the 3DS era had so many obtuse game design elements, and some people say that they were great for immersion. But my argument, a counter argument to that is, it's a video game. It's not a simulator game, it's a video game. So there comes a certain threshold where immersion detracts, like elements, you know, mechanics for immersion detract from the fun more than they add to it. And that's the point where you need to kind of cut it off and focus more on fun. Like, for example, when I played racing games, I much preferred arcadey type racing games like Need for Speed or the ones you actually find at arcades. I preferred those much more than the more simulator style ones like Gran Turismo or Assetto Corsa. And I mean, the numbers of those games, they definitely reflect that, you know? Racing simulators are a much smaller niche than arcade racing games like Need for Speed, or the in-betweens like Forza and The Crew. In general, people play video games because they want to have fun. They don't want the immersion elements, you know, aka sometimes inconvenience elements for the sake of immersion. They don't want those to get in the way of the fun. And because more often than not, they do get in the way of the fun. You know, like myself personally, with Monster Hunter, like hot and cold drinks. Having to drink a hot drink when you're going to a cold locale on a quest. It doesn't give you any benefits. It only prevents a penalization. You know, it only prevents a penalty and allows you to operate at regular capacity. You know, like normally you'd be, I think, gradually losing health in a cold area unless you drank a hot drink, and the hot drink only lasts for a certain amount of time, so you have to stock up on multiple of them. And then with the cold drinks, if you're going to like a volcanic type area, then you need cold drinks to keep you from losing health gradually. It serves that mechanic. Like, I get the immersion argument, but it does absolutely nothing to increasing the fun. It only decreases the fun because if you forget that element of the prep work, you know, the busy work, then you just get to have less fun. You get to be at a disadvantage. It doesn't add anything. It doesn't give you anything more. It doesn't, like, say, give you more stamina or decrease stamina usage or, you know, increased health. Something to incentivize doing it. The only incentive is not being punished for not doing it. And that's just bad design objectively. So it's actually a good thing they got rid of that in Monster Hunter Rise. And other such elements like whetstones, which are used for sharpening your weapon, being finite. In reality, when you and you can't even use the immersion thing for that. Whetstones being a finite consumable that you have to go and farm for. You have to go and, you know, gather at certain, I forget, it's like stones that you use your pickaxe on or whatever, gathering points. You can't even use the immersion argument for that, because in real life, whetstones can be used multiple times before you have to replace them, you know, or a sharpening block, or whatever is used to sharpen a blade, right? You don't use it once and then it's gone. You can use it many times before it dulls down enough that it won't help sharpen. Then you replace it. So the immersion argument is completely invalid with regards to that. So them getting rid of the finite whetstones mechanic was objectively an improvement. There's just no two ways about that. When you use actual logic, there's no two ways about that. And, while I get some elements of the gameplay changes, like making it a bit more fast-paced and action-based, having less focus on tracking down the monster and then like throwing a paintball so that you can then track where it goes if it moves somewhere else on the map. That's definitely up for more subjectivity. Depends on what you're looking for out of the game. For me, since I could never get into previous Monster Hunters, and not for lack of trying, I tried the PSP one, which was a enhanced port of the, was it Monster Hunter DOS, the second game on PS2? I played the enhanced port on PSP, just couldn't get into it. I tried out the final 3DS release, at least in America, Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, and while it was fun for the first, I think it was 3 low ranks, like low rank tiers, because I was playing with my best friend and my brother, but then I stopped playing it for about a week. It was like literally a week or 2, and then they left me in the dust, and I just could not like be of help to them anymore. Like if I tried to join them on hunts in their level, then I would just get knocked out too fast. So then it stopped being fun, and I literally stopped playing the game. I even recently tried to go back after I put in about 150 hours into Monster Hunter Rise. I went back to the 3DS version, dusted off my old 3DS, and decided to give it a try, and it still just didn't do it for me. I just didn't see the fun in it. So like gameplay wise, it just felt too clunky and unwieldy in bad ways. Like clunkiness can be good. Like, I mean, I enjoy playing games like MechWarrior sometimes, and those are big stompy robots that basically are walking tanks. They're kind of clunky and unwieldy compared to games like Armored Core, and then Armored Core is clunky compared to a lot of the like Gundam games. So different levels of clunkiness can be fun still, but Monster Hunter, old Monster Hunter's clunkiness just doesn't feel good to me. So it's just not fun. And, for me, since I grew up on platformers, 2D and 3D platformers, responsive controls, like I don't mind if it's clunky, but if the game does something in a snappy fashion when I press a button, that's how you get a good game feel, in my opinion. So that level, the old Monster Hunter level of clunkiness just is not for me. But I mean, I don't think I'm in the minority in that case, because when they made certain quality of life improvements to get rid of the inconvenience factors and improve the responsiveness of the game feel in Monster Hunter World, it became Capcom's single highest selling game ever. It became their big ticket game. And they have quite a history of big ticket games, from the Street Fighter series to the Mega Man series and so on. So, the Resident Evil series, and they have all sorts of really profitable and high quality franchises that have had very few missteps. Or when they have had missteps, they are not the majority of the series releases. But I digress. It became their biggest game, and then the biggest selling game in the entire Monster Hunter franchise. So obviously the changes they made it more fun for vastly more people than ever had been the case in the past. So I think there's definitely something to it, I'm not one of those annoying hipsters who's like, oh, this thing's popular, so therefore it's bad. No, not everything that's popular or that becomes more popular than the old versions of it is bad inherently. Like, things that are popular for a reason, and it's usually a valid reason. Now, that's not saying that the reason's always good, but the reasons are always valid. So, like, in this case, I think Monster Hunter World and Rise have just become more fun for more people, more types of people, than the very narrow niche that it used to appeal to. And I understand seeing something change and become less for you, change things that you loved about it, it sucks. I mean, I went through that with, like I said earlier in this video, fighting games. They used to have a lot more content that was fun to play and rewarding to play, and then they used to have more freedom in how you could play, like the core gameplay. And so my playstyle used to be rewarded, and it's no longer the case for most fighting games made after 2012. So I get that, it sucks. But it also kind of is what it is, and so I just been playing less fighting games, or I play older ones. And then like the Dissidia franchise from the PSP. Such great games. Actually, Dissidia 1 was the reason I even got a PSP in the first place. And then Dissidia NT made so much drastic changes. They changed it from like a 1v1 action fighting game RPG hybrid to a 3v3 action MOBA, like fighting game MOBA hybrid, and got rid of all of the RPG mechanics and also variety within each character. It's like potential movesets and stuff that made the old Dissidias fun for most of the fans. And so when they made the changes, it briefly became the like most popular arcade game in Japan. But it was like the least popular entry in the series worldwide. And it was just an utter flop when they released it on consoles internationally. And then it even flopped on consoles in Japan because it was popular as an arcade game in the similar way as like Gundam Extreme Versus games, which are 2v2 arena fighting games in the Gundam Mech series, and that one's still going strong in Japan. But Dissidia NT, its popularity in Japan wasn't even very long standing. It like was the most popular for like a year, then it died out, and once it died out, well, the drastic changes they made to the core game put more people than it drew in, and the game outright died, like internationally, almost immediately. And there's like, it's difficult to find full matches on there, and the not to mention the server quality is bad, which doesn't help. And the developers had to can all of the content that they were developing for the game. They had planned so many more characters and arenas and stuff like that, and they just had to cancel it all because the game was such a failure. And that's because they made such drastic changes, and more people found it unfun than there were who found it fun. So like, majority rule, finding something fun isn't always necessarily bad or like inaccurate or incorrect or, to be fought against or whatever. It's just some changes are a bit too much. I think Dissidia did that, and it just became less fun because they removed and changed a lot of things that made it fun in the past. But in the case of Monster Hunter, I think the changes made it more fun for more people. So, while fun itself is subjective, and I think I skipped a step in this whole thing. We have to define fun. Fun is when, for a game anyway, fun is when it gives you, the player, more enjoyment. Well, it leaves the player with a feeling of enjoyment and satisfaction. There's a phrase like, if you enjoyed your time, then it was time well spent. So I think that's mostly true, especially in the case of entertainment. So fun is when you enjoy the game and it feels satisfying to play, and that outweighs any annoyance or frustration that is caused by the game or within the game. So when you look at that, objective, when you look at that definition, then you're able to reach a more objective conclusion, right? So you start with that definition, then you look at the game design. Does this game feel enjoyable and rewarding and satisfying more often than it feels frustrating? And I think most fighting games fail that check because they have such a steep learning curve before you actually get to start enjoying, playing, doing what you want to do when you want to do it, and then having fun playing the actual core game. There's a wall before you actually get to start having fun. So that's, I think, honestly, by design, kind of an utter failure. And older Monster Hunter games were very similar. It was very difficult to learn them. There was a lot of inconvenience elements that were in there by design. There's also a lot of jank, and it just, for most people, not fun. The shmup genre. The shmup genre is an example of what the fighting game genre can become if they failed to evolve beyond the arcade traditional game design. The shmup genre was highly popular in the days of the arcades. Same with the fighting game genre, and they were some of the most popular and most profitable arcade games. But then once arcades stopped being the primary way people played games, when the market moved to being home console and home PC dominated, both those genres, but especially shmups, failed to adjust the way that the games were designed in order to be fun in that non-arcade setting. You have to give players something to do and a reason to play it beyond just the usual arcade high scores or, challenge themed achievements. You got to give incremental achievements up to that point as well. And challenge is good. Challenge is important. Without challenge, there is hardly any satisfaction. You have to have a challenge to overcome, something to achieve, right? But challenge, it walks the thin line between satisfying and frustrating. And that line is different for everybody, which is why it's so difficult, because difficulty-based challenge, extremely difficult games, only appeal to a very small subset of personality types. And then, like Dark Souls, right? Known for being brutally difficult. Once they made a game that gave players more freedom to say, if they come across a wall that they just can't break through, instead of forcing them to smash their head into the wall multiple times until they actually break through, like most of the Dark Souls games, they gave the freedom to say, I'll come back to this later, and go somewhere else in the massive open world. That change alone made it so much more approachable, but they didn't have to make it any easier. They just giving that one bit of player choice and player freedom in the core design made it so much more approachable to so many more types of people, so that the people who want to smash their head into the wall until they overcome the challenge, they can still choose to do that, and they're still rewarded for doing that. Those who want to say, okay, I'll come back later when I've gotten better and when I've gotten stronger, they can do that, and they're still just as rewarded. That's good game design. Now, I myself, I haven't played Elden Ring, and I probably won't because I don't care for dark fantasy settings myself. But they are the makers of the Armored Core series, and I've been playing the older Armored Core games. And they also announced Armored Core 6 coming out this year. So it kind of applies to that too. The older Armored Core games, they were brutally difficult, but you didn't have to complete every mission on a single run-through, a single playthrough. You could fail a mission and then just say, okay, well, I'll come back to this one later, eat the penalty cost from your resources, and just come back later when you've got a better mech. Or, if the mission disappears, just move on and play a different mission. Just cut your losses, move on, and continue playing through the campaign. And then once you clear the campaign, all the missions, including the ones you didn't complete or that you failed earlier, become available again. Then you can go back and replay them. Player freedom. The choice to not be just stuck, bottlenecked into this one wall that you can't cross. So that was part of their old games. It's probably going to be the same thing in Armored Core 6. Now, to be fair, the older Armored Core games have some very janky aspects and some very poorly designed mission structures. Oh gosh, some of the mission structures and level layouts are awful. Like platforming in Armored Core? No. Just no. Unless the mechs can hover and fly better, no. Do not make us platform with these things. The controls in the older games especially were just too clunky for that. No, it's just bad design. Don't put platforming challenges in a game where it's difficult to platform. If you're gonna have platforming, the movement better be snappy and responsive. That's what makes a good platformer, after all. Like Mario and Sonic and so on. A Hat in Time, which was a great one. So, no, don't do that. Just no. They're bad. Bad, FromSoft, that's just objectively poor design. But you don't have to play those missions. You can just bail or try and fail, and then just move on. Or you can reload your save and try again until you figure it out. You have the choice. And then in the earliest ones, I tried playing a little Armored Core 1, the amount of reward currency you get for completing missions is so paltry compared to the cost of parts in the garage shop. So you have to play 5 missions before you can buy a single part, and at that point you're already going to be too weak to start completing missions. You're going to be failing missions left and right. It was horribly imbalanced. the reward rate to cost of parts. They definitely fixed that in later entries, like Armored Core 3, which was the first one I actually started playing. That one was much more fair. You play like 2 missions, maybe, yeah, you play like 2 missions and then you can buy a decent part upgrade, you know? And so then the power scaling, you know, increasing of your strength fairly increases with the difficulty of the missions, for sure. Armored Core 1? Nah, definitely not. They definitely did not have that figured out yet. I think they definitely started getting a better handle on that starting with Armored Core 2 and onwards. Which is the case with many games, you know, the sequel is better than the first. The first is more of the proof of concept, and then the sequel refines it. That's to be expected in many cases. Like Mega Man 2 is way better than Mega Man 1, and in many cases, considered the best in the classic Mega Man franchise. Sonic 2 is far better than Sonic 1. It took what was good about Sonic 1 and refined it, and took what was bad about Sonic 1 and fixed it. You know, all that kind of stuff. That's just a normal thing. But challenge and difficulty are not bad. Just, you gotta make it fair, and make it either doable for more people than who would struggle with it, or give players the freedom to find new ways around the problem, or, you know, new ways through the problem, or just allow them to go do something else and come back later. You know, it's just, you can have difficulty, but it has to be well-designed difficulty. Difficulty for difficulty's sake is not good design, and clunkiness for clunkiness' sake is not good design, and more people than not will not find those things fun. So honestly, it's about finding out what your goal is, what your audience is, and then yes, you do want to cater to your target audience, but you don't want to completely ignore other audiences either. You want to have a little bit of freedom so you're not, you know, pigeonholing players, so it's like you have to conform to playing this the way that our target audience already wants to play, or you're just not going to enjoy the game. That's bad design, and that's what many like fighting games and like old Monster Hunter, old Armored Core kind of did. Old Armored Core less so though. And so it's just, you know, or like older Dark Souls, which was fixed in Elden Ring, and so on. So, you know, fun, I mean, these are video games, right? Like Reggie Fils-Aimé said, and I stand by this quote as being completely true. If it's not fun, what's the point? Because that's what video games are, they exist for. They exist to be enjoyable, you know? That's the whole reason this medium of entertainment even exists in the first place. So I don't think any genres or whatever should be exempt from that, you know? Should defy that purpose. Yes, some games can be designed to be more difficult and perhaps rage-inducing, but still kind of fair, or more competitive, right? More as a vehicle for competitive play between players or teams. But if it's not fun at its core, then it failed the purpose of being a game. And the majority of your audience will never be the hardcore. That's just how it is. You know, speaking in broad statistics, I believe it is said that, let's see, it's like, you know, the 80-20 rules. So essentially 80%, you know, the majority is always going to be around 80%, or at least is more likely to be around 80%, especially of a very, very large sample size. And video games have become one of the biggest entertainment markets. I believe some metrics have said more profitable than even the movie industry, because they're also able to tell movie-like stories, but in an interactive way, which movies don't. Movies are very passive, you just sit and you watch. But, and you know, they're the same every time you watch the same movie, whereas games can have different experiences every time you play it, based on your player input. But, back to the point, the hardcore will always be the minority, so let's say roughly 20%, somewhere around that. If you cater only to the 20%, then you're going to miss out on that 80% of, obviously, profits, but also potential audience. You know, you want to be able to tap into some of that 80%, maybe not all of it. You don't want to be making like games that are like soulless cash grabs that are meant to appeal to only to the 80% and completely ignore the hardcore 20%, right? You want it to be appealing to that 20% hardcore fan base, but you still want to have enough of a broader range to dip into that 80%. That's how you get that growth, that constant growth, or long-term lifespan. If you only appeal to the 20%, well, that 20% is eventually going to kind of age out of the audience. They're going to get older. As unfortunate as this is to say, some will die. We'll get older and we'll die, or from natural or unnatural means, or our interests will change as we get older too, like mine has a little bit. My interests now are definitely different from when I was 10. So that's a different, definition of aging out. So people in that 20% will age out, and if you're never appealed to, if your product or game doesn't appeal to anyone in that 80% majority, well, then that 20% is only going to shrink, and then it's never going to grow. If you're not tapping into the 80%, then you're just incapable of having growth. And that's what Monster Hunter did with Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise. And that's what fighting games have mostly failed to do, though I think some of the developers are starting to figure that out, especially like Capcom with Street Fighter 6. They're actually offering more content than just online and offline versus mode, and good content at that. Kind of taking hints from Smash Brothers a little bit, or like the older fighting games like Soul Calibur and such from the like 2000s. So they're starting to figure that out, but most of the developers in that genre haven't yet. And then the shmup genre is an example of when you do the opposite of what Monster Hunter did and fail to make your game more fun for more people. You just fade into obscurity, and then you only get noticed when elements of your genre or gameplay from that genre gets featured as like kind of a side thing or an occasional diversion in much bigger games in other much bigger genres, like Nier Automata having, shmup, shoot 'em up portions in them and such. So like those three examples, honestly, I feel like they do relate to not only my previous examples of change, but also just in general fun. How do you make your game fun for more people? Or how much should you focus on doing that? Like I said, with video games, fun is the reason they exist, right? And then from there, you can go in all sorts of directions. You can make content for them, like I do, and in some cases make money off of it, like other content creators do, to the point that they can make it their primary profession, their career. You can compete in them, like these League of Legends teams and stuff that make it their career and make a living off of competing in these games, like a sport. Or you can, it can be a vehicle for all sorts of creative outlets like art, fan art, or derivative art, or music, or storytelling, and but if the game's not fun, then it's got nothing. That's the simplest way to put it. And like Reggie said, if it's not fun, what's the point? So I definitely think I would like to hear your thoughts actually on what you find fun in a video game, because I know fun is very subjective, but I think with the objective definition of fun being when a game is more enjoyable and satisfying than annoying or frustrating, I think that gives us a good baseline that can find some commonality between all the different subjective threads that it can go in. So share with me what you find fun in games. What is fun and what is unfun? Share your thoughts, okay? In the comments on YouTube, or if you want to leave, I believe on some podcast platforms, you can leave comments or reviews, or you can hit me up on Twitter and just use the hashtag counterpickpod. I believe it's all one word, or it's counterpick together, one word, _pod, because this is under my Counterpick News Perspectives umbrella. So you can hit me up on any of those three methods. Let me know what you think about fun in games. How important is it? What makes a game fun for you? All right, I'll see you in the next morning boot up, And also, please, on YouTube, subscribe if you'd like to hear more of these, because I'll keep doing this for as long as I can. And I have a lot of other content that I'm making, and I'm kind of pushing towards 1,000 subscribers so that I can maybe hit a YouTube partner and start making a little bit of income off of this to be able to justify, financially justify doing this more, a little bit more. I'd like to put more time into content creation than I can afford to right now. So if you help me reach that YouTube partner point, then I can start making some like ad revenue and such, maybe get some sponsorships, and find other ways of making a little bit of this, making this a bit more of a sustainable thing. So I definitely appreciate every bit of help there. And then also, I have a Ko-fi or Ko-fi. I forget how to pronounce that. Anyway, I have that webpage set up where you can donate. You can either donate one time or you can be a monthly donator, and the monthly donators actually get a special role in my Discord server and access to special channels in there, which will allow you to give feedback and input into my content that I make. And then in the future, of course, future content that I release. And there will also be other perks and stuff like that for those who support. I'm still fleshing it out, coming up with more things, so feel free to make some suggestions. And yeah, we'll see how this whole journey goes as we go along with this. So thank you for making it to the end and listening to my ramblings. This one was quite a long one, and hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or night, wherever it is in the world. Samuel Ray signing out. See you next time.